Elijah is called by God to give a prophetic word to the king. Visions of the greatest prophet Moses is probably going through his head. Here in chapter 17, we have Elijah's first recorded prophetic word. And you can imagine God telling him again, you're ready, Elijah? You're ready? This is what I called you to many years ago when you were a teenager at that camp or when you were a kid. Are you ready for this? You're up. You're going to go speak to the king. But the first word that Elijah was given to give to the king, it wasn't a really popular one. There's going to be a drought. That's not the most exciting first assignment in this big dream that he probably had of what it meant to be a prophet of God, right? He gets to go before the king, but the king's probably not going to be very happy with him or think that he's doing a good job as a prophet. I had a similar experience after my call and first assignment, even though we grew that first youth group, and I thought that I was God's gift to pastors and churches all over Southern California because I could grow a youth group from 10 to 75 people. Unfortunately, while the youth group was growing, the church was declining, and they couldn't pay us after a while, and so we ended up having to turn the youth group over to volunteers, and we went to another church that we thought, we were excited about. We thought, oh, there's more students here. We can grow it even faster, bigger, and had these big dreams again. And we got there to Santa Cruz, California, and for 4 years we were there and did not grow our youth group to over 10 people. And I'm guessing that a lot of you can identify with this. You have a dream that you feel God has given you, but all you see in front of you is a wasteland, and the dream is a mirage in the far distance. You don't feel like you're living up to the potential that God had called you to in the first place. Maybe you even feel like a failure sometimes. These are the things that I felt when my youth group wasn't growing, and there were expectations heaped up on me that's what you want. You want to see more kids come to Jesus. You want to see big events and amazing things, and none of that was happening. But what's interesting is that in the midst of these wasteland times, and in Elijah's life and in my life, God keeps showing up over and over again. But it's hard to remember those things when you're in the midst of the desert. Many of those things I didn't see in those 4 years. I only see looking back after the fact of what God did, because all that you see is the desert in front of you. Even though Elijah had just raised the dead and won a showdown with the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel, Ahab's wife Jezebel says this in 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 2. It says, "Just like you killed the prophets of Baal, so may the gods do to me, and even more if I don't make your life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time." And so she's basically put a hit out on Elijah's life, right? So this is a death threat here. And what does the great man of God, the prophet, do? Does he prophesy and stand up? In fact, it says that he rose up and ran for his life. Elijah is on the run, and the only place to go is deeper into the desert during a season of drought. Not the best place to run to. And Elijah at this point, I imagine, is questioning everything that God had ever called him to. Did God really call me to this? Maybe it was just my own passions, and God wasn't really in it. And I love this. After falling asleep, instead of going back to what God's called him to, God sends empowerment to Elijah. He sends an encounter with an angel, and the angel ministers to him and touches him and feeds him. And of course, when we have a touch of God, we're empowered, right? We're ready to keep pursuing God's dream for our life. But Elijah actually falls asleep a second time. And again, God knows exactly what Elijah needs. He sends an angel a second time and to touch him and to feed him. And he says, "Arise and eat, for the journey is too great for you." God knows exactly what Elijah's going through and exactly what Elijah needs. Even when you're in the desert, even when you feel abandoned or alone or like a failure, like Elijah does right here, God is with Elijah in the midst of the desert. Elijah doesn't even really see it. He's wanting something bigger, but God has been with him the whole time. He hasn't left. He hasn't stopped seeing Elijah. And even in those periods in our lives where it feels like God has abandoned us, where we're trying to fulfill the call, but we're just spinning our wheels, like Elijah felt he was doing, like I felt during those 4 years in Santa Cruz, God will be with you through the desert. And even after 2 touches of God, Elijah's still not ready. 2 touches of God, getting fed and ministered to by angels, he's still not ready. And this gives me hope in some weird, twisted way. Because some of us, especially in the ministry, have been so hurt and so pained by people, by situations, by our own failure sometimes, that one time of God speaking to us, one experience of God, even though we think and feel and know that it should be enough, we're so wounded that healing takes time, and that's okay. God says, okay, Elijah, you want to meet with me, go out and stand on the mountain. Go stand on the mountain, Elijah. That's where people have experienced me before. That's what you want. Go out there and stand out there. And so Elijah goes out, and this giant wind sweeps through the mountains. And Elijah's thinking, the wind comes from the very throne of God. This has to be God. But God wasn't in the wind. And then the earth begins to shake, and Elijah thinks, oh man, the earth shakes before the presence of God. This has to be God. But God's not in the earthquake. And then a fire comes, and he's got to be thinking, right on this very mountain, God appeared in fire before Israel and led them through the wilderness to the promised land in fire. God must be in the fire, but he's not in the fire. You see, each of these experiences Israel had of God in their past, the fire and the wind and the earthquake. And Elijah's desperately trying to find God again. Maybe you know the story. Then a still, quiet emptiness comes. And Elijah goes out into the void. He wants a bigger sign, a clearer answer. We've all been here before, right? God speaking to us and trying to drill it down, and we want that. I know at the end of that 4 years in Santa Cruz, God wanted us to do Chi Alpha campus ministries. But we were still hanging on to what we thought the original dream was of, church ministry and pastoring, of a big congregation someday and working our way through the ranks. And we had felt, though, God tell us specifically, go to Chi Alpha. We were just hanging on, maybe like Elijah was here, to those past experiences, to the past dreams. And that's similar to what happens to Elijah here. He goes out expecting this big word from God. And these are the first 5 words that God says. He says, go, return on your way. He says, I've already told you what to do. I've already called you. And to those that I've called, I've equipped. And I think in my life, one of the most empowering things was when I realized God has called me, and that is enough. Your call is your empowerment. When I called you to myself, and when I called you to this assignment, I gave you all power and authority that you would ever need to complete the task. Keep going. Get back out there and do what I've called you to do, because I am with you.